Injuries are part of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but reoccurring injuries are so frustrating because when you start to get the same thing creeping up, you know, every few months, every couple of years, and it just doesn't seem to go away for decades, it really starts to piss you off, and it's very easy to start thinking things like, it's just genetics, it's just the martial art, it's just how I grapple, or it's just age. If I was to tell you what you did after an injury is the reason that these things keep coming up, you probably wouldn't believe me. And I'm willing to show you a framework that you can apply to any joint injury in this video. And the reason you should listen to me is because I work with grapplers full time that want to strengthen their joints and improve their longevity in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And sometimes they're not injured, and sometimes they message me saying, Greenie, some guy tried to sweep me, my LCL's fucked. And I'm like, awesome. Apply framework, guide them through the process, fix MCL, happy days. And having the ability to just pop up a rehab pathway for a jiu-jitsu athlete who is gonna get injured at some point. Like, we're doing a lot of good strength training, however, the randomness and the complexity of the martial art is going to mean that something crazy is going to happen. You, as much as you may be a black belt, you don't have full control over the actions of a white belt. Do you know what I mean? So what you do after the injury is crucial, right, to getting rid of the reoccurring injury. So before I get into this, I just want to highlight one point. The site of the injury is the most important thing, right? Where you feel injured. Rule number one, before that, you need to actually admit that you're injured, right? And just because you're injured doesn't mean that you can't grapple, right? But you need to sit there and go, that's an injury. Because 9 out of 10 blokes, I'm not injured, it's just a niggle, it's fine, whatever, right? Admit that there is pain in a specific part of your body because your body shouldn't be in pain. So that is the first step, right? First step is admitting you've got a problem. Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever it's called. The second step is using that information very wisely, right? Typically, blokes are going to go down the generic path of pain reduction. It's going to be ice, it's going to be painkillers, it's going to be anti-inflammatories, it's going to be ice baths, it's going to be physios, massages, maybe booking for a physio every couple of weeks. And they don't address the root cause with full force. So they've got all of this that's reducing inflammation, and they've got the joint injury, which is weak. So all of this stuff that you're doing is actually counteracting the strengthening of this exact area that needs to be strengthened. Now, if you could think, the reason it's in pain is because it's weak. And if you had the same mentality to strengthening this area or an MCL, the exact same, positive, optimistic, confident attitude as you would training your chest on a Saturday morning in the gym with your mates. If you had this, the problem is nobody has that same consistent mentality about strengthening their joints as they do strengthening their favourite muscles before a night out. That's a problem, right? But listen, I can completely understand why that is a problem. There's two sides to this coin. There is the fear associated with causing further damage, right? There's a little bit of pain as well as you move the joint. So who in the right mind would train that specific area that hurts a little bit? Let me ask you this question. When you go to the gym and lift weights, what are you doing to your muscle fibers on a microscopic level? You're creating damage on a microscopic level. You're creating damage to elicit blood flow, repair, regeneration, and strengthening of their muscle fibers. Logically speaking, would that change if it was a ligament, if it was a tendon, if it was a bone? Should that change? Or should there be a different approach? Your body is an absolute unbelievable machine at healing. You shouldn't be turning off the body's natural healing process and then doing some rehab exercises. It's just counteracting each other, and you don't actually go through the post-injury process with great efficacy. If you had a framework that worked in a really high level way, think about this, right? The injury in which you got, no matter how many injuries you get in the next 50 years, you would just go, okay, this is what I do. This is what I do. And you would have such calmness about the randomness of jiu-jitsu causing, adverse effects. You'd just be like, sound. And this is how I am. This is the mindset I have, right? And I have blokes on my program that let me know, they're like, Greenie, some white belt tried to sweep me. He's an absolute lunatic. He tried to scissor sweep me. He hacked at my knee, and now my MCL's fucked. And I'm like, cool. All we do is apply a process, a system to that joint, and then they progress through that with enthusiasm, without fear. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of hesitation for the first week or so, but understanding and truly believing in the body's ability to heal itself, and yes, we can accelerate it with really strategic stuff. It's an absolute wonderful thing, and I wish more men appreciated that. But I can sit here as an expert in this field and understand, a few reasons why the problems occur. And like I said earlier on, you've got the anti-inflammatories, you've got the physiotherapists, that clinics are booked. I've got like a strength background, a gym background, and then I went into jiu-jitsu. So when I was coaching blokes in the army, in the parachute regiment, I had to motivate them, and I had to be a good coach, right? I was a coach first, and then I went to jiu-jitsu, and now I coach people that do jiu-jitsu. So with these physiotherapists, and this is not slagging off of physiotherapists, but what happens when you are in the clinic every day? I've worked with physios, by the way. Like, when you're in the clinic every day, you kind of lose them interpersonal skills. You're fully booked, half an hour slots back to back all day. You lose them interpersonal social skills, and some of these physios don't have the gym background, right? And why this is important is because if they don't have the gym background, they don't have the ability to motivate you. They might not have the ability to motivate you, to really push through this pathway without hesitation, with optimism, with confidence. So that's just one of the problems I think about this whole process. I could literally talk about the problems with the process, and it's not that they're not trying to help you. It's just that they've got another person and another person, they've got another 15 clients. If you're last in the day, the head's going to be absolutely battered. So, I've got a very unique perspective on all these matters. And like I say, I coach grapplers on a one-to-one basis that want to prioritize this stuff. But what it fundamentally comes down to is when an injury happens, whether that's an injury that's continued to happen for multiple years, multiple decades, when it happens, if there's pain, there is probably a microscopic tear, right? There's a reason for that pain, right? And when you think about what is the reason for that pain, you don't need to get all crazy. You just need to go, where does it hurt? So straight away, identify exactly where it hurts, right? And that's going to give you a key indication of where needs to be strengthened. It couldn't be more simple. And I know you're probably laughing, thinking there's no way it's that easy. Listen, I've got proof of me helping blokes with this at scale. Shoulder injuries, MCL injuries, ACL injuries, LCL injuries. The list goes on. And all I do is look where they are injured. They send me videos and pictures, and they'll just draw a line on it where they feel pain. I strengthen that area. The pain goes away. But I don't just go into the gym and pounding crazy amounts of weights. But anyway, I'm digressing, I'm getting excited, right? Identify exactly where the pain is. And all you need to do is do a few movements, move the joint a little bit, put a little bit of stress through the joint and point to where the injury is. Once you've pointed to a certain ligament, this is called your medial epicondyle, which is the little notch. This is golfer's elbow, by the way. There's a ligament there. Very commonly strained or sprained or torn in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Or, heavy gripping on the gi and stuff like that. That you can't control the craziness of Jiu-Jitsu. You can't. If we're doing, like a block of spider guard or whatever it is, our grip's gonna be fried. And because there's a lot of this, as we try and grip on, for some reason, because the muscle fibers, the muscle that crosses basically the muscle that forearms crosses the elbow. So even though it's forearm with grip, these forearm muscles cross the elbow. And just because of the sheer randomness and the forces, the horizontal forces, absolutely going to destroy your elbows, right? Just the reality of the situation. But just going, okay, I've identified this is where it's sore. This is where it needs to be strengthened. And then you find a start point. So it's a case of, how the fuck do I strengthen this? Listen, it doesn't matter if it's your fucking ankle, your Achilles tendon, the inside of your knee, the outside of your knee, a weird part of your shoulder. There is always a way to strengthen that area. And sometimes you need to get really creative. Like, I made up an exercise to target one of my blokes on my program, target a certain tendon, right? And the results are phenomenal. Now he can run. He couldn't walk without pain. Now he can run pain free, and he's sprinting and all sorts. But the concept behind it is, if it hurts, load it isometrically first, right? And what I mean by isometric loading is, don't move the joint. Hold the joint in the same place in a way that brings out stress to the exact area. Because what is stress? Stress is controlled. It's controlled, and it's blood flow, it's repair and regeneration. Now, this is not going to work if you're taking anti-inflammatories and painkillers and stuff like that. But, for example, let's assume that this is a fucking massive pole, like let's say it's a brush or a broom or something like that, and I hold it off center. Now, most of the weight's over here. I'm holding it off center. For me to counterbalance all of this and keep that perfectly horizontal, the inside of my elbow needs to work all of these muscles here to counteract that weight going down here. This needs to work isometrically, right? And you're probably thinking, what the fuck are you talking about? You're holding a pen, mate. The underlying concept, right, is that you don't need to do all of this, all of this, all of this. To get rid of pain, right, and I say pain is not even the problem, I'll go on to that in a sec. To get rid of the pain, you need to specifically and strategically and consciously create a little bit of blood flow to the damaged area. Because a lot of these areas, you know this, right? The joints have less blood flow than the muscles. However, the joints actually still have pretty good blood flow. So the strengthening of your joints should really conceptually be not much different than the strengthening of your muscles. Now, a point on this, a sidestep. Men that train their chest, you could probably argue that men that train their chest, it's one of the most trained muscles in men, the chest. Do you know what I mean? One of the least injured muscles as well. Do you know what I mean? Why do you think that is? But anyway, back to it. To get rid of pain, isometrically load the joint. It's honestly, I could literally, there's many studies on this. Go on Google Scholar and just search, or go on PubMed and just search isometric training post-injury, right? I've had blokes laughing their heads off at just how them doing a weird exercise that doesn't actually look, it looks completely ridiculous. Like, I've had lads stood there on a cable machine just holding this for 45 seconds because he's injured the front of his shoulder. Think about your muscle fibers, right? Your muscle fibers are like this when they're injured. So what you want to do is you want to just keep the joints, the muscle fibers still, right? However, you want the muscle fibers still, but you want them to have tension. And the way we do that is the isometric hold, because there's no change of the joint angle. This change of the joint angle means that there's muscle fibers here lengthening and shortening, pulling and pulling. That is going to create further damage. It might not create further damage, but it's not specific enough, right? The exact point of the injury, and another thing is the exact exercise that injured you, or the exact movement that you were injured, will actually help you. It sounds crazy. If you were injured from a sweep where your knee went inwards, well, you best know how, if you think about it, right? You damaged your muscle fibers or tendons or ligaments doing a certain movement. You remember the exact movement in which you got injured. What better way to recreate strategic and conscious repair and laser focused on the area of concern? What better way other than to redo that movement? Now, this is another reason why sometimes the physiotherapist, the physical therapist world, I'm not a physiotherapist, I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not bound by their regulations. I'm like a lone wolf on the side that I'll literally tell you the bullshit. But when you've got somebody who's saying, my elbow hurts, and then the physio is saying, you've got weak glutes, I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about, mate? Obviously, there's a little bit of beef. However, there's a lot of good physios out there, and happy days. You know what I mean? There's a lot of good physios out there. However, sometimes these physios aren't allowed to be good physios because when they're honest about this, they get a knock at the door off their boss, and it's, mate, nah, you shouldn't be saying that. You should be talking about the exact things that we taught you in university by the physio playbook. Anyway, once you've addressed the pain by doing isometric loading, right, and this is such a quick turnaround, that doesn't mean that the area's sorted, unfortunately, right? You've isometrically loaded the area, you are now pain-free, and sometimes the turnaround is within days. On average, depending on how bad the tear is, it's probably talking a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks of specific training, and the beauty of isometric loading is it doesn't cause damage to the muscles, it doesn't cause damage to the ligaments because you're holding the joint at the same time, and it's so targeted, right? You can do it multiple times per day. What I recommend is 30 seconds to 45 second holds, multiple times a day. You can do it like 5 to 10 times per day, right? If you want to have a couple of days rest in between, happy days, but because it's so laser focused on strengthening a specific part of your body, the results just go psh. And think about it as well. The area in which you're training is probably a very weak area, right? So you've done your isometric training, you're now pain-free. The next thing I need you to think about is the area. Just because it's pain-free doesn't mean it's strong. And this links nicely into the typical mindset of pain reduction, right? All you've done is the proper way of reducing pain. The alternative to that, but you basically increased inflammation and strength of the area to reduce pain, right? The alternative is to reduce inflammation, make the area even weaker to reduce pain. If the area remains weak, the likelihood of a reoccurring injury is really high. If you now have the mindset of, I need to strategically create inflammation in an area to make it stronger fundamentally and then progress that strength further, right? So you need to now start strengthening the area, right? And always be guided by your own symptoms, but absolutely fucking train that area. Listen, I'll tell you about me. I've got a bit of a pec minor strain, and it's right here. I think I went a bit too crazy on chest dips a couple of weeks ago in the gym, and it radiates down my bicep because the pec muscle attaches to the humerus bone, and there's going to be a little bit of a crossover there. Do you think I stopped doing chest movements? No, I didn't, right? However, I just changed what I was doing. So like I'm saying to you here, is the isometric holds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds per set. Every exercise in which I'm doing in the gym, right? And for a week or so, I was still figuring out, I'm like, is this injured? Yeah, it's injured. And last week, I did exactly the same movements, but I just did a hold. So I was doing a dumbbell press and I was just holding it there. 30 seconds, 45 seconds. I wasn't pressing because I was basically, at that point, I was figuring out which exercise actually injured me. So I was like, well, I don't really feel this on the pec deck. I don't really feel this that much in the injured area. But then when I went to dips and I held that bottom position, I was like, it's definitely the dips here. This is definitely the position that injured me. And what position to strengthen better than the one that injured you? However, obviously, you have to reduce the intensity right down. I've talked a lot of depth here and I've went left and right. For those of you that have stuck around, I just want you to appreciate that if you can do the right thing after an injury, do your isometric holds, get rid of the pain, and then further pride yourself in strengthening that area to the point that it was stronger with numbers, data, you are now physically stronger in that area than you ever have been. Reoccurring injuries are just not going to happen. The reason reoccurring injuries happen is because you have left that exact area weak. And if you keep leaving it weak, arthritic symptoms. If you keep leaving it weak, arthritis. If you keep leaving arthritis weak, chronic arthritis. You need to get this right as soon as possible because it's not just about the arthritis. I'm not trying to fearmonger you. It's an absolute glorious thing to have a mindset like me about injuries. I just don't panic. They don't faze me. I get injured, right? And it's just like, okay, cool. I just need to do the same movements in which I'm already doing, but I just need to tailor them slightly. And just basically, honestly, it's a really liberating thing. Because if we want to do jiu-jitsu for the rest of our lives, we need to get this nailed down. We need to have this in our back pocket and not panic and be like, okay, this is just what I need to do for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. The injury will go away. Happy days. An injury is an opportunity to develop the strength of a certain area. An injury is just highlighting a current weak link within the system. And painkillers, ice baths, compression gear, rest, all of this shit creates a disconnect from you and that injury. You need to be connected to the injury. You need to be present when you're training it. Them isometric holds will get you pain-free. However, they are only the first step. You need to then strengthen the area. You need to then make the area more resilient. And you strengthen the area by doing strength training, and then make the area more resilient by doing strength training, but just a little bit faster, with a little bit more unconventional movement. Hopefully you found this video useful. Free-rolled it, didn't go off my script. But yeah, this is my approach, and I do this with the blokes on my program. Again, when you're working with grapplers every day, something mad happens, and I need to have a system. I cannot act off emotions when it's people's joints. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, elbow, sound, exactly the same process. Where is the injury? Okay, cool. How do I strengthen that exact area isometrically? Happy days. Once that's done, how do I then move that joint eccentrically, which is start to move the joint now? How do I progress that to a normal movement while laser focusing on that area, right? However, just because we're laser focused on that area doesn't mean we're not strengthening the shoulders, the knees, the hips, the lower back. this is how I operate as a coach on the longevity program. If you are interested in working with me on a one-to-one basis, then the link's in the description to book onto a call with me. Tell me your personal situation. We'll have a bit of a chinwag and get you started. That's it from me, gentlemen. Hopefully you appreciate the video. I'll see you tomorrow.